Oh gosh, hello, hello, hello. I hope everybody can see me okay. I hope everyone can hear me okay. We are going to do something super important today, but we're going to do something super important today in a really chilled out way, if y'all don't mind. So today, we're going to be talking about accessibility. What is accessibility? You know what? The easiest, chillest way to do this is probably to pop over to our notes. So I'm so sorry that today, well, before today, was a massively theory and reading heavy day. So less hands-on stuff, but really, really important stuff to cover. You may notice our notes look a little different today. That's because someone in Discord suggested they wanted to hear from Etta a bit more because I'd been teasing Etta's our technical expert. She's so helpful with stuff. And Etta's really modest. So like, no, I don't need to be on stream that much, but was kind enough to help help. She wrote the notes today, and they are, y'all can probably tell, significantly better than mine. So, first question is, what is accessibility? Accessibility is the practice, and I like this. So sometimes you'll hear artists talk about artist practice, and I really like this for accessibility as well. Here, accessibility is the practice of building our websites in a way that everyone can use them. And this means folks with different medical needs or disabilities. This means folks with different linguistic backgrounds. Ooh, I love it. And like folks with different internet connections and different devices. So accessibility is generally focused on enabling folks with different access needs as it relates to disability. But I want to start there and then have that ever expanding. When you build something, looking at this and saying, how can I audit this? How can I check this? Who would have a difficult time with this? Some of the disabilities that we're going to be working to design to enable access around are folks that have visual impairments. So this could be folks with varying levels of visual impairments like blindness, folks that have low vision, folks that have color blindness. And color blindness and low vision are ones that we can focus on really, really early. Folks also who have hearing impairments, so hearing loss, deafness. If you're building your website where folks need to hear something to make it happen, hey, it's a little bit weird. Like, I don't want folks to be turning up their phones on the train in order to use a website, but it's also going to make it more difficult for folks who have hearing impairments to do this. What about mobility impairments? So there's tons of folks out there who, for disability related reasons or for immediate lifestyle or circumstance related reasons, find using keyboards or mice or touchscreen difficult. And also thinking about cognitive impairments. And this is a really broad range of disabilities that mean folks that have attention disorders, memory issues, language impairments, and you've got to be really careful, sensitivity to flashing lights. We've been talking about standards, standards, standards. If you wanted to get into the kind of complex, but joyously complex standards that guide accessibility on the web, ooh, gosh, I'm grabbing a real good question. I see that, and I'm going to come right back to it when we get a second. Um, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the WCAG, are the W3Cs, the World Wide Web Consortium's sort of official standards guidance on how we can make our websites more accessible. So these websites come under four core principles, and we can use the POUR acronym. And the POUR acronym really makes the most sense if English is your first language, huh? So, perceivable. Users have to be able to perceive, to take in the information that's being presented. You all have already learned about using alt text in images, so folks using screen readers would be able to get that information about what the image is about, even if they can't see the image, or even if they can't load that image. Operable. Users have to be able to operate the interface. So perceivable, your users need to be able to get the information on that website. All right. Operable, they need to be able to go around your website and do the things that the website does. If you've got a forum, your forum needs to be accessible for folks who don't use a mouse or for folks who don't use keyboards, perhaps using a speech enabled interaction. Ed has included a stunning example here to say making sure folks can navigate using a tab key instead of a mouse is a really good example. Understandable. Users must be able to understand the information you're presenting them with. For example, you don't need to use language that's more complex than it needs to be. Oh, I'm seeing some really good questions. I'm going to get right to the end of this. And robust. Users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. So this doesn't make a ton of sense yet, but it's okay. This just means that if we build our websites in semantic, sensible ways that carry a lot of meaning, it means that as browsers get more complicated and more weird, that they'll be backwards compatible. So that even if the heat death of, the heat death of the universe, we're not going to be too worried about websites. But 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, long after I am happily dust, if you're building robust and semantic websites, it means that if browsers continue to keep backwards compatibility in mind, the robustness, the ability to come back and look at the older web be built in. I see a couple of quick questions, and let's look at these really fast. So does the tab key move from element to element by default? It depends. So some types of elements, if you've semantically built your HTML out, should detect and be tabbable, but tabbing from paragraph to paragraph isn't as built-in a behavior. So I'm actually going to ask my absolutely fantastic backstage boss, could you grab me maybe an explainer for what is and isn't tabbable? Off the top of my head, I'm like, some are, some aren't. Mucho saying, I love accessibility features in practice. If it's not too forward, if it's not too much, I love you. Oh, wait, you said you really like that. That is too much. I really like you for liking these. Gosh, sorry. Do I know of any place or project where somebody can contribute to the practice of working on accessibility for web pages, like a well-known community? I love this. So the answer to this is unhelpfully lots of places. What you really want to look for is going to, and I'll type this in the chat as well, go to someplace that hosts a lot of open source projects. This could be GitHub, GitLab, is the L capitalized? Bitbucket, and search for projects that interest you that have open issues. And issues are, hey, here's a problem with this open source project. Here's a problem with this website. And issues can have tags. So, oh gosh, accidentally wrote a nasty word in here. I'm glad I proofread it. So, yes, there's a ton of places you could find where you could contribute to somebody else's website or a project. So the ability to, I'd go to GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and look for web-based open source projects that have open issues around accessibility. Actually, let me see if I can check for, let's see what this looks like in practice. I'm gonna hide this for a second. And where am I? Who am I? What a menacing question. Who am I? So here I'm looking at the GitHub repo for FreeCodeCamp, the platform we use to learn on. Yeah. So it is a website. So it's the FreeCodeCamp website. And what we're looking at here is the code for it. Here, we've got a tab for the code, and here's issues. So these are things where folks have said, hey, I think something's broken. I think something's wrong. I think stuff could be better. And I'm going to be coming into these issues and see, hey, which of these, if any, might say accessibility? Oh gosh, and there's a whole bunch of really cool things in here. I'm not seeing an accessibility one, but this is sort of a good example of, hey, what is an scope accessibility? So these are where folks are, oh, here's an issue where someone's saying they need an improvement in accessibility. Oh, and this is a really, really good one. Scoping means it's not quite defined about what needs to be broken down and done yet. But this is a really, really good one. Oh gosh, somebody fixed some of these already. So with Free Code Camp, once you see the help wanted label, it's generally something you can fix if that's okay. So if it's okay, I will butt back here. And grab. So our very, very wonderful Edda has helpfully grabbed us the documentation for the tab index HTML global attribute. So, the tab index global attribute, love it, love it, love it, allows developers to make HTML index focusable, allow and prevent them from being sequentially focusable. So lets you set the order for where you can tab, and determine their relative ordering. What's first, second, third. Click anywhere in this pane, and we'll try tabbing through our elements. Oh, tab in first order, tabbable due to tab index. Fantastic. So I think we wouldn't usually I don't think we usually wouldn't tab on a div, but here it's tabbable because we've added tab index. This one, because there's a div here and the text inside it, which y'all can go ahead. Let's make this a little bigger. Oh gosh, that's much bigger. There's something I don't like about these divs. Can you guess what I don't like about these divs? So here we've got a div and the text inside the div. What are we missing here that breaks my heart? I bet y'all know. So I'd want there to be paragraph tags inside or something like to tell me what kind of text this is, but we don't have them. It's all right. So here, the elements that have tab index set, and then the numbers setting when we want to do them, and then elements that aren't tabbable by default don't have it. Me saying, okay, but how did the label element become tabbable? Perfect. Beautiful question. So the label by default, the input type text is going to be tabbable by default. Gosh, that's a bit advanced. That's not what I need. Tabbing. Cool. So the input element has some built-in tabbing functionality, but for elements that aren't inputs where you can't automatically tab to them, using tab index lets you do it. I love, love, love these questions. Thank you. You are unnecessarily helpful. That sounds like I'm being sarcastic. Y'all are genuinely so helpful. Cool. So, let's come to actually look at our notes. You've heard me say screen readers a lot of times. Like, we need to have really good alt text because our users who use screen readers really rely on that to tell us what an image is about. A screen reader is a type of assistive technology that helps visually impaired folks access computers, but can also be really useful for folks with different types of disabilities. And being able to get good information out of the web is so important. Y'all, it's 2026. Being able to get information and put information into websites will change what school you can go to, whether or not you can apply for a job, whether or not your rent's on time. Big, important stuff, right? A screen reader is not a text to speech device, although it can be that. Screen readers can have a variety of different types of output. A screen reader, at the end of the day, is looking at the content of a website and reproducing that in a format that the user can perceive the information from, if we're using the POUR principles. This could mean it is reading it aloud, but sometimes there are Braille displays for folks who are visually impaired who are also Braille readers, or navigation aids and web browsing assistants. A bunch of operating systems have screen readers built in. Mac OS, iOS, Linux, we've got a bunch of options. Android's phones have TalkBack. Since all of these are different, I'm going to let y'all use them so you can have a look at the ones that are relevant for you. Mel makes a really good point. Sorry, this is really unfair that I'm like, these are really good points based on what I think is cool or what I'm interested in. I admit I have a backlog of fun and interesting things I would like to learn, and Braille's been in my backlog for ages, and Braille displays are super interesting. All right. So this one is real. Obviously, all of these are super duper important. As a lady reaching a certain age, and gentlemen and thembies of a certain age, anybody of a certain age, large text options become more and more relevant for us every year. Large text on our websites, and we'll talk about responsive text. I love responsive text when we get there in CSS. Ooh, we're going to keep doing just like semantic HTML is going to come all the way through this course. Even after we do the focus on accessibility, we're going to come back to accessibility again and again and again. So responsive text, being able to make text bigger or smaller based on the screen, and letting users set their text bigger and smaller are definitely going to be things we'll cover. But large text and Braille keyboards also exist. So large text keyboards are keyboards with larger text. And Braille keyboards have Braille characters, allowing folks to touch type or touch type with some extra hints with Braille. Large, yeah, they're a tactile. Oh gosh, does everybody already know what Braille is? I'm so sorry. Etta does way better notes than me, and I always assume folks have already known. Braille is the coolest thing possible. Braille is a different way to encode many character-based languages. There's different types of Braille alphabets, there's different types of Braille orthographies, but it's a tactile, it's a touch-based reading and writing system where raised dots, or sometimes for illustrations, raised shapes, represent the numbers and symbols or the images that visually impaired folks can access. Some keyboards will have both large text and a Braille pattern in the keys, which is so cool. I love how folks in the chat are just like, look, I'm not that old yet. Me neither, me neither. But they're saying we're already um, using bigger text. That's a really good question. I'm going to save that. So we've got a question saying, hey, if you set your text for a larger size on your website, does that mean people using programs to increase the text size will get annoyed now that it's too large? Um, So if you're setting a larger, I'm going to park this for now. So your ability to let users change the size on your website is usually something that folks can do in their browser operating system. And we can do a little bit more of that with CSS. If you make the text on your website too big, it shouldn't have folks who've got default settings to enlarge the text shouldn't automatically expand that in most use cases. But it could mean that folks on smaller screens, if you haven't made your text responsive, if you haven't made your text change for different screen sizes, it might annoy people a bit. If I'm on a little tiny phone and I've got just 2 or 3 words per line, I'd probably be a bit annoyed. Amazing. So where are we? Where are we? I see a really fun question about Braille, and I'm going to save that till the end if that's okay. Gosh, 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 we've got a whole bunch of really good questions. But I'm also going to keep hopping through this so I don't keep y'all all day. Structure. So some of your users might be using, and these are sort of the different types of accessibility aids that folks might be using. So you've got screen readers. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've got large type and Braille keyboards. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the act of moving a mouse around or keyboards or touchscreens don't work for everybody. So some of your users are going to be using alternative pointing devices. These could be trackballs, joysticks, or for folks who do use touchpads really comfortably, touchpads instead. So these are alternatives to the traditional mouse. They can be really useful for folks who have different types of access needs. Uh, this is going to be me showing my age again, but a long, long time ago, joysticks were really common for home computing gaming, and they're still really, really important as a pointing device for access. Touchpads, a lot like touch screens, but separate and not on the screen. They can be really, really useful for folks who've got different types of access needs around. This is easier to use. And even this is just more comfortable to use than a mouse for some folks, which I love. We're going to come down. Oof, we're looking into my future, isn't it? Screen magnifiers. So, screen magnifiers can be a physical project or they could be a piece of software that enlarges the elements of a screen. They can be helpful for people who've got low vision or visual impairments. I like to think of screen magnifiers as sort of like reading glasses for the web. I say as someone who just had to buy reading glasses. Most of them let you customize how much zoom you have, but and this is what we were talking about earlier, when we are considering users who are using these, when we're making our websites, using these scalable fonts. So these fonts that keep the layout consistent if the user resizes the page. Different screen sizes, thinking about responsive design, and we'll learn more about this soon. This high contrast. So using high contrast and customizable colors is going to be so important. So I think all of us have tried to use, I tried to read a sign where it's like pink on white or navy on black, and the contrast isn't high enough to make those characters really pop. One thing that might also be especially useful is it's really tempting to have a sticky nav bar so that when you scroll down, your nav bar stays on the screen. That's really, really useful for a lot of folks. But for folks using a magnifier, that is going to get right in the way all the time. Making sure that you use HTML text elements instead of, ooh, and I love this. This is true for almost everyone. This is true for screen readers as well. It is so tempting to throw up a screenshot of text, isn't it? Making sure you include those as text whenever possible. Most major operating systems have one screen magnifier bit of software built in. We've got the different ones here, and I won't go over them because they're different for different ones. But if y'all want some stretch homework, playing with this can be a really good one. And there's some really good third-party tools as well. So I'm really excited about I'm sounding a bit repetitive though. So like I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited about this. I'm also really excited about voice recognition software because I used to work with speech data and voice data for a long time, and I found it really interesting. Voice recognition software and voice recognition tools allow people to navigate websites or applications on their computers or their phones using their voice to perform tasks instead of using a keyboard or a mouse or an alternative pointing tool. These can be helpful for people with disabilities, but these can be super helpful for people who have their hands full. If I'm trying to navigate around a web page while washing the dishes, having speech or voice recognition tooling enabled can be a really, really good, really lazy way for me to do this. And Mel makes a really solid point as well. Some colors and patterns, not just. So we do need to keep our contrast high, but we need to also be really careful too, not have patterns that clash and are really, really aggressive to people. Let's come into the questions we've got so far. So, ba-ba-ba. Hmm. Oh, so this is a general web one. I'm going to save this till the end if that's okay. I've got two general ones and I'll save that. Um, Not strictly a programming question, but Matthew's like, is it Braille universal? There's a couple of, like any kind of languages, there's a couple of different Braille conventions. There's some additional characters that some languages use and some don't. There's some different ways to map Braille. So there's sort of the core Braille that a lot of folks use across languages, but there's also a bunch of cool history. I am not an expert. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to park this for me to read as well. So I've just dropped the Wikipedia article for this, mostly because I've read about it in the past and want to read about it a bit more. Mel's asking about speech directed and voice tools to say the models. Oh, this. Sorry, I'm going to stop apologizing for being exciting. Mel makes a really solid point to say, hey, the context behind this is for voice recognition software, these are built on models, so speech recognition, machine learning, AI models that learn to recognize human voices. And these models that drive these tools can have different abilities to understand or fail to understand different accents based on the data that they've been trained on. And Mel, I'm so excited because this is such a good point to say, hey, if we've got a user who, or if I'm a user who has a speech impediment, or if I've had a stroke, or if I've have an accent that's non-standard in the language I use, do these models need to be trained on my voice individually? So generally speaking, unless you are a really specific, really technical, really nerdy user, you're probably not going to be training speech models on your own voice. What actually, what I would say the responsibility is of the people making these models and training these models is to get increasingly diverse and increasingly varied data sets to train on. So, speech impediments, folks having a stroke, different types of accents, even different kinds of languages right now can impact folks' ability to use these models. Yeah. As individual web developers, our ability to do a lot about this isn't something we have a lot of control over. Sorry. So, stunning, stunning question. And it's part of my special interest. So I won't go into it forever, but you're not wrong that these should be better accounted for in these tools. But as individual web developers, we're generally not the people. I don't know folks making websites who train their own models unless it's for fun. Okay, so when we're building websites, we're thinking about accessibility the whole way through. It's not that we build a whole website and we're finished and we think, heck, I have to check my accessibility. Just like semantics, we're not going to throw that in at the end. This is going to be a practice, an approach for how we do this. So there are tools we can use to make sure, or to try and make sure, our websites and digital content meets accessibility standards as defined. And I think we had a really good question last week where somebody asked, how can I check the accessibility of my website? And we talked about Lighthouse already. But let's look at some accessibility tools. Here we've got Google Lighthouse again. We've got Wave, which the reports coming out of Wave include accessibility features. Aria, I'm smiling when I talk to y'all about Aria because we're going to get to this in a couple of sessions. And I like Aria so much. Just as a spoiler, Aria are some extra accessibility features that were built into HTML, but that aren't HTML elements. They're really, really cool. And I like them so much that I have a cat named Aria. IBM has an accessibility checker that has a browser extension. These are so, so great to use. If you're saying, yes, which one should I use? Use them all. Give them all to me. All, more, all. Okay. Mia's asking, I just tried the magnifier. Does it read alt text for images? So I don't know which magnifier you're using, but as a general rule, a magnifier and a screen reader, which could read something out loud or could produce it as Braille or a different format, are going to be two separate pieces of accessibility tech. You may be using a magnifier that has a built-in screen reader, but by default, I don't think it would. Okay. Oh, and this is a point which I'm gonna pull you to the front of the class. Mel's been saying, hey, do you know what? I've been thinking about getting a trackball because of the amount of space on my desk, not yet to move my mouse. And this is really, really important. When you build your websites around accessibility, you're building things, building websites, building web experiences that include folks with different kinds of disabilities. Y'all are going to do it because it's the right thing to do, right? Y'all are also going to do it because in more and more places, building inaccessible websites can be against the law. Yeah, it is discrimination. And you're going to do it because I told you so, and I'll come and get you, and I'll shake you and look disappointed. But also, when you do build accessible experiences on the web, it also, the tooling that people make, the websites that people make, have the opportunity to just make it better for everyone. Hopefully, we are going to learn more about this on an optional guest session on the 20th. Uh, Eda, if it's not a terrible bother, could you drop the link to that into the chat? Ha 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 ha. I remember distinctly. Was it a week and a half ago? So it was a more of an evil cackle than I was aiming for. Folks are asking if I'm threatening violence. It's not violence. My disappointment is not violence. I hope my disappointment is not violence. When I say I would get you. I mean I would just be very disappointed. So on the 20th, so Wednesday, feels like Wednesday, Sarah Joy is going to join us about whimsicality, bringing the joy and whimsy, so silliness of accessibility to everyone. I love it. Yes. Wait, I'm going to snap back over here. I remember distinctly that I was so mean to y'all talking about headings, where I was like, headings, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. These are not just for decoration. These are not just for styling your text, because we would style our text with, wait, when we have good HTML structure, and here are example of well-structured semantic HTML, like using our headings correctly, it adds that context for folks using assistive technologies. Here we've got an example. H1, music store page. H2, featured albums. And then we've got some text. So by default, it gives us different font sizes that give your users who are getting their information visually different clues. But it also provides navigation that folks can use using screen readers or using assistive technologies. And it reduces the cognitive load. I love the idea of a cognitive load. A cognitive load is the amount of, so cognitive load is a psychology term and it's denser than this, but I'm going to give the cheat answer. I'm going to give the sort of cliff notes, the summary answer. It's the amount of things we're processing or trying to hold in our brain at a given time. And using well-formed headings also improves the semantic readability of your site for the bots who tell search engines what's going on. So when we can, because it's the right thing to do, it's the accessible thing to do, and I told you to, we'll make our title page titles or something really similar to them in H1, our major section titles in H2, subsections of those major section titles in H3, and so on and so on. Y'all are not allowed to skip around in the heading hierarchy. You can't jump for like a H2 to an H4. And make sure that the content that follows each of those headings is actually related to those headings. We're going to use the correct HTML elements instead of just like you're not, y'all are grown. I don't think I can tell you what you're allowed to do. In the same way that I would ask you not to use HTML elements for styling when you should use CSS. Also, don't use CSS for styling things to look like H1, H2, H3s when you need to also include the appropriate elements. Please, please, please. All right, we are going to go into the debug a coding journey page, and we're just going to do a little bit of this together. The whole world is stressful. The whole world is hard. But this is HTML. This is building websites. This can't hurt us yet. We're going to build a preview of this, and we're going to be doing some debugging. So the big thing is, I am not going to do all of this. I'm going to talk through some of it, and we're going to look at some key stages together. I'm seeing, even before we get started, based on the default behavior of heading elements, my journey into learning how to code, and semantically as well, my journey learning to code, early challenges and breakthroughs feel like children of my journey to learning to code. They feel like subheadings for it. Accessibility matters, and then screen readers. Screen readers feels like a subheading, a subtopic into accessibility matters. Let's start our coding. Oh gosh, and we want to go back and re-explain this. So I explained this really, really poorly. So it's really tempting for folks who've learned some HTML and haven't learned CSS yet to use different heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 to style text to make it bigger or smaller. And I don't want you to do that, please. Please don't do that because these headings hold semantic meaning. And we've talked about this a couple of times. We're going to use our CSS to style our headings. But once you learn CSS, it's also possible to make text look like an H1 without using an H1 element. I would also ask you not to do that if what you wanted to do was make that piece of text a heading. If that's okay. Wait, not if that's okay. Please and thank you. Oh gosh, and we're going back to a question when let me bounce back here and let me come to where am I? Who am I? So who am I is absolutely not the question y'all asked for. Poor. Ha ha ha. So, hmm. Remind me where. Yes, understandable. Thank you. So, Eulidil's saying, hey, 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 when we talk about making our content understandable, where do we draw the line? If you're making a poetry blog, some of the language is going to be complex inherently because you are weaving beautiful images out of this. Perhaps if you're writing a advanced chemistry curriculum, you're going to be using a lot of technical jargon. Yeah, where do we draw the lines? So using direct, simple language here, the general guideline, and this is very philosophical. You may notice that building websites, I direct you back to this is a personal philosophy to develop more often than many of you may have thought would come up. Here, what I would lovingly suggest building your personal philosophy to approach this around is when the content doesn't require a set level of complexity, using the most simple and direct language possible. So if you're building a poetry blog, fantastic. That text is already reasonably set. We don't have the ability to go back and simplify it without changing the core of what the content is. And that's almost definitely not what you want to do in a poetry blog. But saying, hey, I want the introduction, I want the navigation, I want the language around this to be as straightforward and direct as possible because folks are going to use that in order to navigate and folks to get around. Okay, okay. We've got somebody saying, hey, but what if I try inline styling? Yep, I think, can you give me a little bit more information about this question? So just because sometimes the um, stream has a little bit of a delay, can you give me a little bit more context about what if I try inline styling around when I'm doing what? Sorry, thank you. Going to debug our coding journey blog, and hmm, I'm going to try not to do too much of this with you because I'm mean. But what I am going to do is talk through a lot of this. Yeah. So we've got a debug here, a debugging project. Camperbots created coding journey blog page. Love it. The page has some accessibility issues. I love this. So here we've got the kind of debugging that I'm the most excited for, which is we're going to sort out our accessibility issues little by little, one by one. So so is it okay? Inline styling with your heading elements, H1, H2. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I would, I'm going to push that question back to you, which is I haven't tried running, and this is not the only type of assistive technology. This is not the only type I need, but I'd be wondering what an H1, hmm. So almost I don't want an H1 in line with other elements. And I can't tell if that's just me being prickly and old fashioned. So what I'd say is we've got the links to the different types of screen readers. Oh, I might encourage you to go ahead and um, build a little tiny web experience that has an H1 or an H2 in line with other elements and try getting the screen reader to process that for you and see what it says. I'm coming to our accessibility. Come back here. Sorry, I wasn't logged in. We're going to start our coding. Y'all heard me ages ago tell you Do not let me catch you putting more than one H1 on a page. H1 is like, what is this page all about? And if you're giving us your user more than one H1s, that's a complex way to say it, you're giving them some very complex information and very contrasting information about what this page is about. So we've got an H1 here. We get an H1 here. We get an H1 here. Absolutely not. So we are going to say, welcome to Camperbot's blog, and we're going to leave that one as an H1. And we're going to turn the rest of these to H2, and these are going to be what the subheadings are, what the different major sections are. So we've got this H1 is getting changed to an H2. Where are we? Where's the other H1? What's next? What's next is not the whole main point of the page. That is not the title of the page. Y'all scream when you, don't scream. Y'all holler at me when you see another H1. It's welcome to Camperbot's blog is an H1. I think I've got all of the other H1s. Everything's fine. This is just HTML. It can't hurt us. Not yet. Okay. So if we look at our first div element, where is that? Our first div element, div H2. Is that our first div? That's our first div. Okay. Very helpfully highlighted white so we can see it. So folks who are able to process that information visually have a really good clue here. Good contrast. Love it. Here, we look at our first div element. There are two identical H4 elements to have as subheadings. And remember, we talked about this. So we said you are absolutely not allowed to jump from an H2 and then have the child of that be an H4. Absolutely not. That is because an H4 means, hey, I am the subheading that comes below an H3. Jumping like that, it is semantically super weird. H3, so we're going to change that to an H3. And since both of these breakthroughs is not the child of early challenges, like conceptually, breakthroughs and early challenges are the same level of importance of heading. So let's change both of these to H3. And our instructions tell us to, huh? All right. Ha ha ha. We've got an H5 element. Where's that H5? Oh no, absolutely not. Y'all look at this. So we jumped from an H2 to an H5. We were not allowed to jump from an H2 to an H4. You for real, no, we are absolutely not allowed to jump from H2 to H5. Let's change this to H3. So we've got the appropriate semantic laddering here. Yeah, that screen readers is a conceptual child. It is a subtopic of accessibility matters. So this is great because we're getting, and I love this exercise because I am constantly fussing on y'all. Hey, we want to keep our hierarchy for our headings right because it's good semantic HTML. But here, that good semantic HTML also makes things so much easier for folks using assistive technologies. Check our code. We're just going to do one or two more of these, and then I'm going to grab those questions I saw from folks that are sort of just a bit more general. Haha, the bootcamp is free. Free Code Camp is the learning platform we use, and Free Code Camp is free. This is the closest we can get to a commercial, which is not to say buy anything or send us money. You cannot send me money. You cannot send Etta money. You cannot send Carmen money. There's no way to do that, and please don't try. But if you've got the cash and if Free Code Camp materials have helped you, they're a registered charity. So donations is a really solid thing to do. You're gonna ask me later? Ooh, yes. So Mel's saying, hey, when we're looking at the heading levels, these relate to the hierarchy of these headings. Gosh. For example, if we have a main element with an aside as a sibling element, would the aside have an H2 heading, but the section in the aside have an H3? So the heading level refers to the hierarchy of the content within the topics. So if you have a So you need a topic subtopic relationship for these headings. If you have a main element and then you've got an aside next to the main element, you can have an H2 heading to say um, links to my friends' websites. And then having a H3 under it, you can do that, but the H3 would have to be a sort of child subsection that goes with the H2. If I had the H2 of my friends' websites, the H3 could be friends' blogs. It couldn't be my enemy's websites. Hmm. I guess unless you have friends that are your enemies. Does that make sense at all? So I'm going to do one more of these, and then I'm going to abandon you. And please, please, I've got two more questions to grab from y'all in the chat. If anybody else has any questions at all, please, please, please let me know. So here, this is a real good hint for what this section could be. This is our navigation. So we've got my journey, accessibility, next steps. We're going to want to wrap this in a nav element. So this whole section with the H2 as well. Let's try it and see. Oh, that's just fun. And I'm going to be really mean and I'm going to ask y'all to do the rest of this on your own. And let's come back here. The notes. Now, I think that this might be what you're saying. It's like, hey, so headings being H1, H2, H3, these are, yeah, what we're really talking about here is hierarchy of content more than hierarchy of elements in the HTML, if that's okay. Yeah. So if you use Word or if you use Office Libra or if you use Google Docs, the feeling of heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 for breaking down this piece of content is a subsection of this, which is a subsection of might be a comfortable way to look at that. I'm going to so throw in any more questions you've got while very quickly I will go over what I'm asking you to look at after this session. I know, more reading. Please read Working with Accessible Tables and Forms. Also, so what are the best practices? Then we've got why is it important for inputs to have an associate label? Please try to do all of the steps from build a tech conference schedule. And then we're going to break through debug a donation form. And that's probably going to take you an extra couple of days just because that's a little bit of work. Yep. So Mel's made the point. Do the different headings you use need to sit within their element, sit within parent elements? Yes and no. So headings will always have everything has to be within your two HTML elements, which are the parents of everything. All of your headings need to be in the body element, which is where the displayed content for your users is. And practically speaking, it should probably be in the main element if that's the main thing what you're talking about to your users. So we had a couple quick questions. Bramble saying, hey, random, love it. Bramble's noticed that in some of the labs and workshops that we've seen, we're not asked to add section or main or header or footer elements. Yeah, should these usually be added to our websites? But sometimes individual labs or workshops, are they just leaving those out because that's not what we're focused on? You are absolutely correct. What's really hard in teaching and really hard in learning is trying to abstract away so folks are focusing on the right thing. If you're building a web page, it's the boilerplate code, the HTML, header, footer, you're going to want those on almost every one of your pages. I mean, the HTML element, you're going to want on every single one of your HTML pages. But sometimes the labs just leave those off so you can focus on write this code instead of write out every single little line. Thank you for catching that. I always have a difficult time of remembering what are we focusing on in a way that feels a little bit artificial. And Sunny said, okay, okay. So if you have a home page and the main point of the page is navigation, do you put that in a main? So I think we might be asking about a couple of different things. So if you have got it. I got you. So Sunny, what I think you're asking is if I have the home page of my website, and what I expect users to mostly do on that homepage is navigate to different parts of my website, can I put the nav in main? Um, and as a general rule, please don't. So, yep, if your nav is going to be repeated across your website, and it's often really good practice to say, hey, my nav's always on the side, my nav's always on the top, just because it makes it much easier for your users to navigate all of your pages having the same structure. Going ahead and putting your nav outside of main, but still really visually accessible or semantically accessible is something you can absolutely do. I wouldn't put and if you're talking about doing this for your own like personal website, like, hey, I'm Sunny, here's my work, here's my GitHub, here's me looking cool at the beach. One thing I've done on my own portfolio website is I've got the nav across the top, but then in the text where I'm like, I do these things, I'll also include a link to, so sort of duplicated content of, hey, here's a little blurb about my work. Here's a section about my work where I talk about my work. I'm going to repeat that link because on that homepage, I think that's where you want to be. Stunning. What I'm going to do is, please ask you to have a look at these after the sessions. And if you are available on the 20th, and don't worry if you're not free, don't worry if you're not available in real time. These videos are always available on YouTube after the fact. The session with Sarah is going to be fantastic. Oh, and users saying, hey, Jess, you mentioned when we were talking about headings, different types of word processing. And I mentioned Office Libra. Is it Office Libra? LibreOffice. I'm so sorry. I'm a goofus. LibreOffice is a piece of free open source software for for doing the types of word processing tasks that we often see proprietary tech using. Oh, thank you so much for catching me on that. I absolutely said that backwards. Okay, so I'm gonna let all y'all go, and as a general rule, I'm going to absolutely ask y'all to have the easiest possible morning, the chillest afternoon you can, or if it's nighttime, y'all get to bed, okay? I'll see all of you tomorrow. Bye.